Good morning, friends. Today it's starting to heat up a little bit. We're going to have a bit of a heat wave come in over the weekend, and then it's going to drop all the way back down to a nice, cool, typical September weather. But it's going to go up to like 28 degrees this weekend, which I'm not really looking forward to. I'm kind of done with the heat, but you know what? This should be like the last real heat wave. I'm sure there's going to be other times where the temperature will go up, but this is like, feels like it's going to be the last, real like summer heat, where you wear shorts and it's sweaty and whatever. I guess you could call this the Indian summer, as many people like to call it. So, I'm just preparing myself mentally for what's going to happen soon. So today I've been actually thinking a lot about what I should talk about. There's at the same time nothing really to delve into, and at the same time there's infinite things to talk about in a short span of only 10 minutes. So I'm thinking for the future episodes, I will probably be delving back into topics that I've already covered beforehand. So the question as to whether I delve into them or not, I guess, is going to be irrelevant, as some of these topics can be discussed for hours and hours on end, and they've been discussed in some ways for thousands of years, right? So today I kind of want to talk a little bit about philosophy, right? Not in terms of anything specific within the realm of philosophy, just what it is in general. I feel like it's this sort of thing that seems to have this notion of being very intellectual or very academia based, right? You go and study philosophy in college, or you get a PhD. People who study their masters in philosophies are technically called doctors, which is something that quite perplexes me. They are not people who understand medicine in any way whatsoever, but they have that title for whatever reason. And I'm not even sure, is like doctor even a legal thing? Is this like a government title that's given to you? Like if you become a sir in the UK, is that sort of like at the same level you become a doctor, right? So to me, I think philosophy is sort of separate from the concept of being purely an academic study, right? You have this stereotype of, the professor with the beard and the sports coat with the the elbow pads, and he's got the little round glasses, and he's balding slightly, and he spends his whole day in the library studying and researching, and he's an expert at Western philosophy. To me, philosophy is, simply just a way you sort of choose to view your life. You choose to view your existence in the world. And this comes from a very base mentality, right? Everyone sort of has their own unique way of looking at philosophy. It might not be the right philosophy, quote unquote, that will attain them any kind of happiness or fulfillment. But in the end, it is still a philosophy they follow, right? It's a way of life. And I think that's sort of something that's lacking in a lot of degrees, especially when we're trying to study philosophy or trying to study how people live their lives. There's this notion that we need to have a very rigid, rationalized way of looking at how philosophy is handled. And I think we can go a lot more in depth and see that maybe we can look at the irrational way of living, and how this way of living, while in terms is irrational in a logical sense, it is still a way of life that people choose to follow, right? So I was just kind of thinking about that earlier when I was waking up, because I think if we have just like a typical ordinary guy who works at like an office space, right? Let's take the show The Office, for instance. and just pick any random character. Let's just say, like Stanley, for instance. What is his philosophy, or what is his goal in life to choose? What are the things he values? And I think these are sort of questions we can ask ourselves when we are talking about philosophy. And I feel like this is an important thing that I've noticed when people who study philosophy talk about, is that you're not really trying to find the quote unquote like truth or whatever. You're merely trying to find the other people's perspectives and see how they argue towards what they perceive as the truth, or what they feel it is. Generally, most of the time, these arguments are countered and disproven with very effective ways. No matter how well the arguments are put together, ultimately these slices of what people attribute to be truth are actually not in that case whatsoever. So where I'm going with this exactly is, I feel like this way of studying philosophy is very closed off to a select few individuals of people who sort of have this sense of authority or superiority based off of how they construct their arguments and how they choose to use words, right? One of the big philosophers that is often discredited as being a philosopher is Ayn Rand, right, who came up with the objectivist theory. And a lot of philosophers claim it's like, oh, it's not legitimate. She doesn't use argumentation well enough. She's, being selfish is immoral, yada, yada, yada. Regardless of whether you agree with her or not, it's the power of her influence that, to me, claims her status as a philosopher, right? There are more people who read Ayn Rand than people who read Kierkegaard or read Thomas Hobbes or whatever, right? Nobody even knows who those people are, but people know The Fountainhead, people know Atlas Shrugged, more people know what objectivism is than any of those other philosophers, right? And to me, that's a more important notion in terms of how a philosopher can influence other people based off how they choose to live their life. And I feel like this sense of closing it off into this academic world, into this field of study and argumentation and rationalization, just sort of limits the scope and how we can discuss things, right? We want to sort of open this up to a layman's world, which I feel is very important, and it's lacking in a lot of philosophy in general, where it's sort of turned into this quite pedantic and pretentious term to denote anyone who chooses to study this field, right? So, everyone has their own philosophy, whether they think they do or not. It's just a matter of them believing that they can have an influence on other people or write something about their philosophy that people could relate to or understand, at least to the simplest degree. And I think this very rigid sense of what it constitutes to be a philosopher is in a form of idolization, right? We're taking these few select people and calling them philosophers, and it's like, I'm not a philosopher, but these are philosophers, and I sort of worship these people as being intellectually superior to me, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that they have the title of philosopher and everyone else doesn't, to me, is kind of it's just stupid in the simplest regards, right? Anyone can be a philosopher in their own right because they have the power to sort of see their own life and see how they might be able to attain some sort of happiness or fulfillment, or be able to see how the world works in their own way. Whether it's right or wrong is irrelevant. It's the fact that they have that viewpoint, and I feel like that's something that's lacking in terms of discussion and in terms of literature. We sort of want to have all kinds of points of view, and that sort of helps connect us with other people. It helps us empathize and understand, the human condition, or whatever you want to call it. So that was on my mind today. Hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.